was fortunate enough to come into possession of a beautiful Renaissance dress. It was a hand-me-down from my guild. It looked like it had been altered a number of times. It had been well loved and well worn. So when I asked for permission to, can I take it apart and do a little fixes and repairs to it, they were more than happy to say yes and let me go at it. And I was happy that I would get to work on this beautiful dress. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's silk. I mean, there's not enough fabric that I can cut off somewhere to do a burn test, but I'm pretty sure it's silk. Someone put a lot of love into this dress, so I'm glad to be able to give it some TLC and bring it back to life. So even though I was sick, I was determined to get this project at least started. So, cuddled up in bed, I pulled out my seam ripper and got to it. Interesting thing with seam rippers, when it's your own project, it's torture pulling out those stitches that you put in because it means you made a mistake and you now have to fix that mistake. But it's a lot more cathartic when you're pulling out someone else's work. I don't know why. It just felt pretty darn good. With it taken apart, I could then look into the guts of the dress and see what was actually going on. And frankly, I was kind of surprised. On the bodice, on the kirtle, whoever had made this dress had decided to make their strength layer cut on the bias. And what that does is it gives it some elasticity, it gives it some pull and some shift. And what had happened was that strength layer had shrunk, leaving the silk layer to be bunched and gathered and no longer fitting. I came to the decision that I could either take every piece of it apart and basically start from scratch, or just do the quick little fixes that I had wanted to do and call it done. And considering my illness and I was running out of time, I decided I was going to take that easier route. I was going to get it done, make it wearable, but still do my best to make it look adorable. But there are just sometimes when good enough is the best option. Hello, Editing Melody here. Clearly I was not as recovered as I thought, and recording me left out quite a bit of information in this video. I will attempt to fill that in. Whoever had made these last repairs on the dress clearly cared a lot. They hand-stitched all of the skirts onto the lining, and just an act of love. With the layers separated, I went in with my iron and very gently ironed and pressed everything as best I could. I wanted to get it crisp. I took the side seams apart on the bodice in the attempt to smooth out the silk lining. Didn't quite smooth it out fully because there was a lot of gathering in the armpits, but it still helped a little bit. The sides in front didn't quite line up, so I made sure to line everything up so I would have a new shape to the bodice. I did end up creating a couple of tucks towards the side in order to get the front fully smoothed out, but it did work. Another decision I had to make was whether I was going to attach the skirt to the lining or whether I was going to sandwich it between the inner and outer layers. When it came to me, it was attached to the lining, and I struggled with that decision quite a bit. I went back and forth for a while, not quite sure what I wanted to do. If it was attached to the lining, that would make it easier to take it apart later, or if need be. But on the other hand, I really did feel that giving this garment its new lease on life would be covering those stitch lines and doing it the right way. Although, as I was sewing it, I decided maybe I should remove the cartridge pleating tape, but that's neither here nor there. back onto the scene, there were a lot of layers to go through. It was a little tricky. The surcoat was in fairly decent shape, but there were little spots and pieces where it seemed to be coming apart. You had some threads coming apart, the seams on one of the shoulders didn't quite line up, and it just really needed that love. So I once again removed the skirts from the bodice. I created a new line for the bodice, making sure all of the lines lined up and stitching those down. For this one, I decided that I was going to attach the skirt to the inside of the lining instead of sandwiching it between. It didn't have that strength layer. I was fairly sure that the thick cartridge plating would just go right through the silk, and I didn't want that to happen. So I attached it directly to the lining on the inside the way it had been. And did some repairs on some of the trim that had been coming apart and looking a little bit sad, and I attached 2 new clasps to the front. I did go through and did some stitching down to make sure that the shoulders lined up properly, and the surcoat was done. Now the dress was still a little bit too long, but I went into this knowing that was going to happen, as my daughter was quite a bit shorter than whoever had worn it last. And so I had decided that I would put a hoop skirt underneath this dress and give it that illusion of the farthingale that you would have in that time period. I ordered a hoop skirt from Amazon and it came in and it was way too short, so I exchanged it for another one. Even though I had ordered a size up, I'm fairly sure they sent me the same size. But at this point, I was out of time, and it was just gonna have to work. If you've seen my last video on children's Renaissance costumes, you know that one of my biggest concerns is skirts falling down. And as this had just a ribbon tied into the hoop skirt to hold it up, I knew that it was going to fall down. It was not going to stay up on its own. So I took precautionary measures and created some straps to attach to the hoop skirt and put over her shoulders. This had the added benefit is it was no longer necessary for it to tie up at her waist, and was therefore able to tie at her hips and come a little bit lower. Overall, this project went fairly fast. It came together well, and I was able to complete it even after my cold, which was just in time, as we do have a Renaissance fair coming up this week. She was so excited to try it on for a practice run here at home, and is very much looking forward to wearing it to the Renaissance fair and showing it off to all of her friends. You've probably noticed in the videos of her that I do try to cover her face for her safety. My last few videos have been focused around costuming for my daughter. I think it's time to make some costumes for me. Those are already in the works, so make sure you subscribe so you can watch next week's video. If you liked her Ren Fair costume, you're gonna like mine even better. It's comfortable! Also in the works are a couple more adult-sized dresses I think you're really gonna enjoy. So now let's get this video finished. Get back to it. See you next week.